Greetings and salutations, fellow book readers. This is Mark, and the book I will review today is the Odyssey. Behind me is the Mediterranean, this great inland lake, the cradle of the Western civilization, and where Odysseus sailed over 3,000 years ago. So I thought it would be appropriate to record the review of the Odyssey here. Before we continue, this is personalized limited edition of the Odyssey with leather cover designed and made by me. At the end of the video, I will tell you a couple of ways of how you can get one for yourself if you are interested. Now let's get back to the review. The Odyssey is one of the two major Greek epic poems written by Homer. The other is the Iliad, and it is one of the oldest works of literature still in existence. Its influence on the Western culture cannot be overstated. A countless number of academics have studied and dissected it, and its theme has inspired many other works of literature such as James Joyce's Ulysses, which is what the Romans called Odysseus. There are doubts about whom the real author was, but I think in the context of the book, Homer can be defined not as a specific person, but rather he represents some unnamed individual who wrote in Homeric Greek during the Archaic Greek period. The Odyssey was written around the 8th or 7th century before Christ, but the original story takes place around the 12th century BC, and it was probably passed from generation to generation as an oral tale until it was written down. And as it is common with all repeated oral stories, each teller left a bit of his own interpretation, so we can only wonder how much extra meat the Odyssey acquired over the centuries. What is Odyssey about? It is a story of homecoming, not metaphorical, as many modern dramas are, but a literal journey home by sea, blocked by many obstacles and obstructions, but overcame with courage, tenacity, and a bit of luck, and an occasional helping hand from the immortals. It is also about challenging and going against gods, or what we can call destiny, and not giving in to its will. The tale can serve as an inspiration to persist and not give up when faced with difficulties and hardships. Tell me about a complicated man. Muse, tell me how he wandered and was lost when he had wrecked the holy town of Troy, and where he went and who he met, the pain he suffered in the storms at sea, and how he worked to save his life and bring his men back home. He failed to keep them safe. Poor fools, they ate the sun god's cattle, and the god kept them from home. Now goddess, child of Zeus, tell the old story of our modern times. A bit of the plot. The plot is Odysseus' journey back home after the end of the Trojan War, and it takes us on a sea voyage from Troy all around the Greek coast to Ithaca, passing through Aegean and Ionian Sea and many Greek islands, and taking the tour through North Africa and Western Mediterranean. Odysseus angered Poseidon, god of the sea, and he in return makes his journey back home as difficult as possible. But to his luck, Odysseus has goddess Athena on his side, who makes things a bit easier. The narration covers the last year of the journey, and the other 9 years are presented as a memory when Odysseus is retelling his adventures. The story begins on the island of Ithaca, where 20 years has passed since Odysseus left to participate in the Trojan War. His son, Telemachus, is 20 years old and is persuaded by the goddess Athena to go search for his father. So he leaves his palace, which is filled with 108 suitors trying to win the hand of his mother and Odysseus' wife, Penelope. Then the story shifts to Odysseus, who, after spending 7 years as a prisoner of goddess Calypso, escapes to the island of Phaeacia, where he tells the local king the story of his adventure since sailing from Troy. He describes his visit to the island of Lotus Eaters, who dragged his crew, and then the island of Cyclopses, where some of his men are eaten, and the island of the cannibalistic Laostrygonians, and finally he arrives at the island of the goddess Circe, who transforms half of his men into pigs. He leaves Circe after 1 year and sails to the end of the world and back, avoiding the land of sirens and six-headed monster Scylla, and visits the underworld in the land of the dead. Down the dank, mouldering paths and past the ocean streams they went, and past the white rock and the sun's western gates, and past the land of dreams, and soon they reached the fields of asphodel, where the dead, the burned-out rats of mortals make their home. Further he goes through the storm created by Zeus, and in the end he finds himself alone and naked on the island of Calypso, where he becomes her slave and lover. After Odysseus ends his story, the king of Phaeacians puts him on a ship which drops him quietly on Ithaca. There, unrecognized, he enters a competition to win the hand of his own wife Penelope and to avenge himself and his family against the man who disrespected his home. And that's the basic plot. What do I think about the Odyssey? It is the first and one of the greatest adventure stories ever written. It has everything one would want in a fine adventure tale. There is an iconic hero, a large number of villains, beautiful women, and almost invincible obstacles. The Odyssey carries on from the Iliad, and there is a reminiscence of the great Achilles and the wooden horse built by the Greeks which sealed Troy's fate. But above all, it is about Odysseus, who, in contrast to most Greek mythological heroes, is very human, and his humanity, his fragility and courage is all he has to go against the supernatural obstacles and overwhelming elements. I think the challenge Odysseus is facing is summed up the best in this sentence from the book. Of all the creatures that breathe and move upon the earth, nothing is bred that is weaker than man. And against all these odds, he manages to get the job done. Yes, he has some help, but as the old saying goes, gods and luck favor those who risk it all. What makes Odysseus admirable is that he is not a whiner nor complainer, but accepts all the suffering and punishment without sulking, and just stays focused on his objective and keeps moving forward. Not all the adversity and pain he encounters can be blamed on the gods, and there's plenty of it that comes from other humans, even his own crew. Men are so quick to blame the gods. They say that we devise their misery, but they themselves, in their depravity, design grief greater than the griefs that fate assigns. To be fair, in the Odyssey, as in all Greek mythology, the gods are violent and vengeful and do have a lot of power over men and constantly interfere in their lives and do their fair share of the damage. So Odysseus' willingness and courage to go against them makes the story even more inspirational. He also faces some temptations as great as the obstacles when, for example, the ever-beautiful Calypso offers him immortality if he stays with her. But he is loyal and chooses instead to return to his aging wife, even as he admits that mortal women cannot compete in beauty and charm with the goddesses. I'm not implying that Odysseus is some kind of Hellenic Boy Scout, because he is not. He is a man of his times and has his own sadistic tendencies. He says, "The blade itself incites to deeds of violence, and there will be killing till the score is paid." And he kills, without much restraint, people who betrayed him, and the ones who tried to take what he considers his, such as his wife Penelope. Penelope, who has been waiting patiently for 20 years waving her tapestry, which, if finished, would mean either Odysseus' return or acceptance of his death, and she is free to be taken by another man. So she procrastinates and moves slowly to give her husband as much time as possible, since she believes he will return. She gets most of her strength from her son, Telemachus, who has never seen his father, but believes, just like his mother, that Odysseus is alive and will return. So, with a bit of persuasion and help from Athena, he goes to search for his father. I think an important part of Homer's writing is the recording of the Greek mythology and the tally of the gods worshipped and feared during his era. The Odyssey features a great array of Greek gods such as Athena, goddess of wisdom, her uncle and rival Poseidon, god of the seas, and two nymph goddesses, Calypso and Circe, and also Zeus, Hermes, Hercules, Ino, and Helios make their appearance as well. Greek mythology seems to be a game of chess where mortals are the pawns used by gods against each other. But occasionally a pawn manages to outsmart a god, as is the case in the Odyssey. Odysseus blinds Cyclops and angers the god of the seas, who swears to avenge his son. Athena decides to take Odysseus' side, and this balances the odds a bit. But did it really in the long run? Cyclops asked his father to punish Odysseus by making his voyage home last 10 years, and that's how long the journey lasts. So perhaps the implication is that mortals alone are helpless against gods and can only submit to their will. Also, we can see destiny and fate portrayed as the dominant force of our lives, when before departing for Troy, Odysseus is told by an oracle that he would not return home for 20 years, and obviously the prophecy fulfills itself. I think many readers ask themselves, is the story true? The obvious answer seems to be no, especially in relation to the mythological part. But I would say the human part of the story might be inspired by a real voyage home, but to what extent is anybody's guess. There are parts of the tale that are real or realistic, such as the human habitats mentioned, which were confirmed by the archaeologists as real places that thrived during the times of Odysseus. And I think the last one to be discovered are ruins of the palace on the Odysseus' home island of Ithaca, dated back to the 14th century BC, which fits the time window of the story. Sometimes the line between reality and fiction is very fine, and it is difficult to see when one ends and the other begins, and the vagueness increases in relation to the age of the text. The Iliad and the Odyssey were considered works of fiction until the end of the 19th century and Schillmann's discovery of the ruins of Troy, which injected some realism into Homer's writings, at least to the theme of the story, which is the journey home after the end of the Trojan War. To sum it up, the Odyssey is a great epic tale that connects us with the events, places, and people from a long time ago. It is a direct window into the ancient world and not an interpretation of the historian. I know translations are interpretations, but in a different context from what I am referring to here. The Odyssey is written as a poem in a pleasant, easy-flowing verses, but I don't know if all the credit goes to Homer or it has been enhanced by the translator. A word to be said about translations. There are dozens of them spread over the past 5 centuries, so if you are a picky reader, you might do a bit of research about different versions available to see if you can find one that pleases you the most. For example, there is a new translation by a female writer whose name I cannot recall, which seems to be more of a modern interpretation of the classic book, influenced by current social trends, which for me just doesn't do it. But it might be easier to swallow for the younger readers, especially the women. The Odyssey seems to have an intimidating reputation, and this prevents many people from making an effort to read it. But I would say the reading of the Odyssey is much more enjoyable than its reputation will make you believe it, so give it a try. There were a few efforts at adapting the Odyssey into the cinema, the most famous being the 1954 film with Kirk Douglas and Anthony Quinn, but I think they all fell short of what they were trying to achieve. Okay, let's talk about the physical book. The book I am holding is a paperback which I transformed into hardcover leather-bound edition. To make the cover, I use grade A, naturally tan hide I buy from a tannery in North Spain. It is the same leather Louis Vuitton uses to make his bags, so it is top quality. I do all the processing of the leather myself. First I designed the cover, and here I used a mythological painting of Odyssey sailing through the island of the singing sirens. This is the back with the blurb, and inside the front cover I printed a quote from the book. If you want to see a more detailed video where I explain how I transform paperback into leather hardcover, click on the link in the description. I will make a maximum of 100 editions of each title. Each one will be numbered and initialed, and the numbers will go in chronological order from 2 up, since number 1 stays with me. The price will be around $100, so if you would like me to make one for you, you can click below on my email and send me a message. I do not guarantee I will do it, since it will depend on the time I have available, access to leather, and if I can get my hands on the copy of the book. Now, if you're not willing to spend the $100, but you still want the book, what you can do is click below on the PayPal link and donate $3 or more to my channel, and for every 100 donations, I will make a lottery and draw one name, and the winner will receive the book. So, if you are cheap but feel lucky, this might be the way to do it. Also, your donations give me the extra motivation to make the book reviews, and I appreciate them very much, so thank you in advance. One more thing, when you make your donation, remember to include the title of the book you would like to win. The book itself is beautiful. Visually, it has a very nice texture, it smells great, and the more you handle it, the more beautiful it will become. And it makes a great gift for yourself or somebody who appreciates books. So if you want one, don't snooze or you might lose. Well, that's it, so let's end it here, and until next time, keep your ear close to the ground and read a book. Adios.